AFL-CIO President Richard Trumka is at it again. Now the union boss is pressuring Congress to rush the appointment of Elizabeth Warren to head the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, a watchdog byproduct of the Dodd-Frank financial overhaul. And he wants this done while the Senate is on recess. Wow. If unions have a stronger say than the United States Senate over who heads the new bureau that can regulate our economic activity, exactly whom will Mrs. Warren protect? Consumers or the unions? How's that for a setup, Skinner? Here now, our stocks business editor and my colleague Elizabeth McDonald, radio host and Freedom Watch regular in the studio today, Nancy Skinner, and Independent Institute senior fellow and Suffolk University economics professor Benjamin Powell. Ben, to you first. Are you surprised at all that the government is trying to get this micromanager of the economy into her job while the Senate is on recess, because they know it will never happen if the senators who want to vote against her can take to the floor?
Nothing these guys do ever surprises me. But I really don't think that's the big issue. It's not about the personality of who's going to run it. It's the fact that we have this agency in the first place. We shouldn't have one. The financial services sector is constantly making innovations, coming up with new products. We don't know in advance which ones are going to be successful and which ones are going to be failures. You need a market test for that, not some czar in Washington who can approve new financial products. Just a bad agency regardless of who runs it.
EMAC, what does the Wall Street, what do the banks think about this? This is an agency funded by the Federal Reserve, so the Congress can't do anything with its budget. It really will have no accountability whatsoever. And now Professor Warren, Harvard Professor Warren, may actually show up as the head of this without even a Senate confirmation vote or an FBI background check.
Well, you know, they don't like it. They never liked it. They feel like the consumer protections were already in there at the Federal Reserve, the OCC, and other banking regulators. I'm always wondering, when are they going to recess a point, by the way, at deficits are? You never see that. But getting back to the point at hand, we may see another person, another individual, Raj Date, who's a McKinsey, Deutsche Bank, Capital One executive. He may come in instead of Elizabeth Warren. That board, by the way, does have to answer to the Financial Stability Oversight Board, that Marvel Comics Super Justice League, whatever, of financial regulators, right? So there will be some rulemaking oversight there, but still, Wall Street doesn't like anything.
Nancy, you can't like this. Democrats want the rule of law. Democrats want accountability. Democrats want the president's nominee confirmed by the Senate, right? Or should Richard Trumka, your friend from the AFL-CIO, get his way? You didn't think I was going to go easy on you just because you're here.
Well, okay, and you didn't think I would not talk about Bush just because I'm here.
Well,
he had 171 recess appointments, so take that off the table. It is, your guest was right. The Republicans just don't want this consumer this board in place. So Elizabeth Warren, now she is, unlike Bush, who put a lot of foxes watching in the hen house, she really will enforce this. It was her idea to begin with. Why shouldn't she be the head of this board?
Isn't the lesson of history that a centrally planned economy is never as prosperous as a free one? I mean, do we want to turn into East Germany or Eastern Europe with a Harvard-trained bureaucrat telling bankers how to invest and merchants what to sell?
That's not what this is about. This is about, like, if your house burns down, when you rebuild it, don't you put fire alarms in it? This is about preventing, monitoring the system to make sure that this never happens again.
Ben, this is about the government telling people how to engage in what should be their free choices to engage in. Yes or no?
Yes, this is voluntary capitalistic acts between consenting adults. They should all be legal. The government does not know in advance which ones are going to be successful and which ones are going to be failures. They simply don't know. Therefore, they shouldn't put limits on what innovations that we can have.
Aren't these things going to stifle the economy from a president who, when he was with David Cameron in Europe 2 weeks ago, said the free market produces more jobs than the government?
Yeah, well, the unlimited, you know, just rulemaking coming out of Washington will stifle the economy. I think Wall Street will ignore it. I think the banks will ignore the Consumer Protection Bureau, and they'll lobby to have changes made as they go along.
How much does the president owe Richard Trumka and the AFL-CIO, and is Richard Trumka likely to get his wish? The president would have to recess appoint her tomorrow before the Senate comes back into session on Monday. What do you predict?
You know, I don't think that that's what his decision is. This board is in place. Someone was going to head it up. whether it's Elizabeth Warren or not, I don't think like he's staying up at night worrying about that.
All right.
It's going to happen. He does not want another financial meltdown to ever happen.
And he really thinks that bureaucrats in Washington can prevent financial meltdowns that they caused the last time around.
Because the regulators were in the pockets of the big Wall Street banks last time.
Skinner, we got to switch
why
gears.
Isn't going to be the case this time?
All right, good point, good point. Jobless claims are up again this week, with 427,000 people now seeking unemployment benefits. How much of that is due to the endless new regulations passed under Dodd-Frank? Yet, another regulation survived as the Senate failed to end the controversial swipe fee rule, which requires a cap on how much can be charged every time you swipe your debit card. When will the Senate wise up, Professor, and give the free market a chance to work and let banks and merchants and consumers decide what these swipe fees are going to be and not politicians? Ben.
I don't know when the Senate would wise up and do that, but hopefully the voters, citizens start demanding more of it. The problem with these put a price control on swipe fees, you're going to get less swiping. If you limit what the bank can collect, they're going to have less incentive to want to work this network and make it out there and easy for you to spend your money. Just like when you cap ATM fees, you see fewer ATMs around for people. Same problem's going to come up here.
Nancy, I think that you probably will agree with Ben on this. And obviously, if I'm wrong, you'll tell me. The folks who use swipe fees, the folks who use debit cards can least afford for their debit card to be taken away from them. And if the swipe fees goes up, the number of people using debit cards will go down. The reason we even have these swipe fees is because of other regulations that have taken money from the banks. Right? Skinner?
I'm not crying for the banks, okay? Look, there are usury laws that we put in place.
It's the consumers that are going to be hurt. The customers
and
of the
retailers.
banks.
Hey, let's face it, Judge, this was a big lobbying battle between the banks and the retailers. And the retailers and the small businesses who are getting killed when it went from 10 cents to 44 cents per swipe. I mean, you know, there has to be some protection so that the retailers aren't getting killed.
No, Nancy makes an important point, but the question is, are consumers going to be helped? I think retailers will likely pocket the difference, and the banks will start to hit us with a really obnoxious annual debit card fee just for accessing your own money. So, you know what we don't like about this is Chris Dodd saying of Dodd-Frank, making that Pelosi-like statement, well, we have to enact the bill just to see what's in it and how it's going to work. He said no one knows how it's going to work until it's put in place. And so that's the unintended consequence. We're going to have to possibly pay an annual fee on our debit cards.
All right, Ben,
just to use your own money.
To delay the bill for 2 years. So, you know, Wall Street's always saying we hate uncertainty. So what, we're going to put 2 more years of uncertainty into it?
But Barney Frank didn't like it, and it wasn't in the original Dodd-Frank bill.
Ben, have we reached the point where we expect the government to decide what's fair and reasonable, rather than things like supply and demand and the free choices of investors and consumers and bankers and merchants to decide what is fair and reasonable?
As for what's fair, I have no idea what fair is except what two people mutually agree upon. And as an outside observer, I've got to say that's fair. But then there's a question of what's the right price to make the market work? And Nancy, you say that it's gone from 10 cents to 45 cents. Well, Nancy, what is the right price? How do you figure it out? And how is a bureaucrat going to?
I'll give you the last word. We've got about 30 seconds. How can you decide, or the Democrats decide, or Rich Trumka decide, or Elizabeth Warren decide, or Barney Frank decide what's fair?
Somebody has to decide. And so let's take a look at...
What about the market?
They'll gouge us, okay? Because these are big, all the little banks are exempt from this. These are big banks gouging consumers.
I get it. I'm not supporting the banks here, but I'm saying the retailers are pocketing the difference, and the banks will hit us anyway with another fee on debit cards.
All right, guys, it's a pleasure. Ben Powell, Nancy Skinner here in the studio. EMAC, my friend and colleague, thanks very much for joining us. Back with the plain truth on the Constitution, compromise, and debt. After this.